Prashant Bhushan has just started. My name is AC Michael. I'm the moderator for the day. May I please request Alvin to start the IQ anthem, please.
As salt of the earth, as leaven in the dough, we Christians must rise up to the fore. God's love we will show, the light in us shall glow. In IQ together we soar. Clergy and laity, women and men, in Christ divisions all shall merge. Bonded and free, you and me, all voices must be heard. As salt of the earth, as leaven in the dough, we Christians must rise up to the fore. God's love we will show, the light in us shall glow. In IQ together we soar. Sister and brother, father and mother, in Christ we all of us are one. Older or younger, richer or poorer, our church needs everyone. As salt of the earth, as leaven in the dough, we Christians must rise up to the fore. God's love we will show, the light in us shall glow. In IQ together we soar. When times are tough, when things get rough, with Christ united we will stand. For the need of the hour is a sharing of power, when we walk hand in hand. As salt of the earth, as leaven in the dough, we Christians must rise up to the fore. God's love we will show, the light in us shall glow. In IQ together we soar. In IQ together we soar. In IQ together we soar.
Mr. Rafael de Souza, the BCS president, may I request all participants to keep their audio system muted. The speakers will be given time to switch on their audio at the time of speaker. The rest of the participants, since they are going only to listen, it would be good to maintain your speakers muted. Thank you. Mr. Rafael de Souza, may I give you time to speak, please? Participants to keep their audio system muted. The speakers will be given time to switch on their audio at the time of speaker. The rest of the participants, since they are going only to listen, it would be good to maintain your speakers muted. Thank you. Mr. Rafael de Souza, may I give you time to speak, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. AC Michael, the moderator. Respected National President, Sir, of All India Catholic Union. Respected Senior Advocate, Shri Prashant Bhushan ji. Respected Retired Justice Rebellor, Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court. Respected Dr. John Dayal, a very eminent columnist. And last but not the least, our Reverend Fathers, Cedric Prakash, who was a very eminent activist and a thinker. Welcome to all of you, first of all. I also welcome, on behalf of the Bombay Catholic Sabha, the co-organizers of this webinar, all of you 83 participants who have joined, and this is also being attempted to be live on YouTube. And those of you who are participating through YouTube, also welcome. The topic of today is the need of the hour. As we are being attacked, our rights are being attacked slowly but steadily by the establishment that is. I would not like to comment more on that because the national president would brief you perhaps on the webinar. And I would once again welcome all of you to this webinar. Let us go back listening to the versatile speakers, going back enriched with wisdom. Thank you once again and welcome on behalf of the Bombay Catholic Sabha.
We will now listen to our National President of All India Catholic Union, Mr. Lansi Dikuna. I hope the members are here, All India Catholic Union, but for the benefit of Mr. Prashant Bhushan, let me recall that All India Catholic Union is more than 100 years old. It were lay people like us who started this organization 100 years back. And I'm told a senior person like senior members like Dr. Dayal that this is the largest laity body in Asia, not just in India. So therefore, we are proud to be here and we are very proud to have you. So I hand over the mic to our national president, Mr. Lansi Dikuna.
Thank you, AC. Respected Justice Rebellor, respected Mr. Prashant Bhushan, Reverend Father Cedric Prakash, Dr. John Dayal, Advocate Raphael, AC Michael, AICU members, and my dear participants. The All India Catholic Union is now 101 years old, a long time in the life of an organization. It is of the Catholic community, but created and run by ordinary people on the volunteer basis. We are not priests and bishops, but have by the work globally of worshippers like us to be officially recognized in canon law, the law of the Catholic Church. Canon law gives lay faithful the right to organize themselves and form association for the betterment of the church and to strengthen the faith. I say this to remind ourselves, the leadership of the Catholic Union and its member, that law, whether the church or the country, it is powerful instrument to improve conditions and circumstances in which we live, study, work, and worship. We accept that the secular matters in civil life, we are governed not by canon law, but by the law of the land. But we point out that our life and in fact existence of the members of the Catholic Church is assured because freedom of religion is enshrined in all its dimensions in the constitutions of India. And yet this freedom is constantly under attack, under threat, under pressure, not only from the people and the force that to like our principles or our religious tenets, but also from the government, politicians do not like the fact that Christians and especially Catholics, schools and colleges teach egalitarianism and our supportive of Dalits, tribals, and the poor. After independence, the nation recognized that the terrible practice of caste and untouchability has forced a very large number of people into the form of slavery. The constitutions in 1950 under Article 341 provides affirmative action to help them in education, jobs, and political representation. But almost immediately the government issued the Presidential Order of 1950 to amend Article 341. It wanted to use the amendments called Part 3 of the Article 341 to keep the Dalits in the Hindu fold, denying them freedom to faith which every citizen has. No one can bind us to one faith. We have the rights to choose faith or even reject religions altogether. AICU was among the first one to challenge it in 1950. We were proved to be right. Sikhs and Buddhists who do not believe in caste and egalitarianism were given the reservation, but Christians of Dalit origins were still furnished and deprived. Mr. Prashant Bhushan's organization challenged the amendments in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has now sent the case to the Constitutional Bench. We are fighting this case. We want to use the law, the forum of especially the Supreme Court as not just ourselves, but to expand the entire range of freedoms and the human rights. We hope this webinar will educate our members and others on this issue. Perhaps we have most vibrant constitution that guarantees the right to life, freedom and expression, freedom of religion, and yet we are aware that either by press legislation or through the executive orders, these rights are attempted to be diluted and taken away. So much so, even the judiciary, which we expect is most reasonable, is found wanting the controlling of the executive and interrupt the constitutional and legal provisions. The webinar is arranged to focus on the rights to freedom of expression, the recent judgments of Supreme Courts, and how it might impact activists coming before the court with public interest litigation. It is our good fortune that Senior Advocate of Supreme Court, Mr. Prashant Bhushan, has so kindly agreed to participate. The AICU is grateful to him. We have an excellent panel from divergent walks of life, including Justice Rebellor, Rev Fr Cedric Prakash, a past president and the spokesperson, Dr. John Dayal. I congratulate them. We also have an experienced moderator, AC Michael, to moderate, and I'm sure at the end of the webinar, we will go back more educated on the issues. AICU National Secretary, Public Affairs, Advocate Rafael D'Souza, for the efforts of the organizing this webinar, and for the Bombay Catholic Sabha for hosting. Thank you and wish you all a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lancy. That was really crisp and to the point. As a national president, you actually made us proud. Now, may I, before inviting our main speaker or chief speaker, Mr. Prashant Bhushan, I have a little bit to read about him actually, since I'm not personally known to him. Mr. Prashant Bhushan is a well-known figure for public interest litigations in the Supreme Court of India. And his involvement and working against India Against Corruption movement is something we all know about. Very recently, we saw his interview along with his father with Mr. Karan Thapar, and we knew about his interest more in that. His area of interest has been human rights, environmental protection, accountability of the public servants. He is associated with many organizations that include Center for Public Interest Litigation, People's Union for Civil Liberties, and Transparency International India. He's been working for the campaign of judicial accountability and judicial reforms. We know what happened recently. I'm also told, and I read somewhere, that he charges just about 5% for his lawyer charges. Because this pro bono activity allows, because of his family background, somewhere in his biography is written somewhere in Google. So I thought I should mention about this. And he's well known for RTIs, and we have seen that he has brought RTI into the figure in India. He was one of those who moved for RTI, and we are happy that. And some of the famous PILs are, we all know, 2G scam, and this our vigilance commissioner, so on, and A. Raja case. There are many others we can talk about. And Bhushan Saab was against the death penalty for Ajmal Kasab, which was very famous terrorist. So I end here about his introduction because huge, lengthy, there are too many pages to introduce. May I now invite our chief speaker, Mr. Prashant Bhushan, to take over, please.
Prashant Bhushanji and AC Michael, just one line before you start. I have just received a message from our Cardinal, who is also the president of Christian Catholic Bishops Conference in India. He writes to us, congratulations to you all for the good work that you have done. I wish you all success for the webinar you are organizing. I have met Shri Prashant Bhushan when we addressed a convention together. The other three speakers are also very well known to me. I am sure the program will be beneficial to all the participants. With warm regards and best wishes, Oswald Cardinal Gracious, Archbishop of Bombay, President CBCI. I thought I will share this greetings with you all. Thank you. Sir.
Good evening, friends.
Good evening, sir.
All the distinguished personages of the All India Catholic Union and other distinguished people present here today. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be invited by the Catholic Union to address you and to talk about contempt of court and public interest litigation. As you all know, about 70 years ago, when we founded our republic, we gave ourselves a fine constitution in which we established democracy in this country. We gave our people various fundamental rights, which are supposed to be inviolable. The right to equality, the various civic rights under Article 19, and the right to life and liberty, which has been expansively interpreted by the Supreme Court to include the right to live with dignity. We also established several institutions in order to protect our democracy, in order to protect our fundamental rights, in order to protect free and fair elections, in order to protect our public exchequer. The most important of all these institutions is the judiciary, the higher judiciary, the high courts and the Supreme Court. And the role of these courts, the higher judiciary, is not merely to dispense justice and decide disputes. It is one other very important role is to protect the Constitution from being violated by the executive or the legislature. It is also to protect fundamental rights of the people and to ensure that the executive and the legislature remain within the bounds of their powers. So the judiciary has been given a very important responsibility and enormous powers under the Constitution. And they have also declared that even constitutional amendments made by 2/3 majority of both houses of parliament cannot violate the basic structure of the Constitution, which includes equality, secularism, an independent judiciary, etc. Now, we ask this question as to what is the state of the judiciary. So in order to ensure that our institutions function in accordance with the role given to them, assigned to them by the Constitution, it is important in a democracy that people should be able to freely discuss and critique these institutions, including the judiciary, so that people should be able to speak freely about what is the state of affairs in the judiciary, how much corruption is there in the judiciary, what is the system of delays in the judiciary, how accessible is the judiciary to the people, what is the state of independence of the judiciary from the government. Because in order for the judiciary to perform its role of protecting fundamental rights as well as ensuring that the executive and the legislature remain within the bounds of their powers, it is important that the judiciary remains completely independent of the government and the legislature. So people have the right and indeed the duty to constantly critique all institutions, including the judiciary. And therefore, they must be able to speak and discuss freely what is happening in the judiciary. Now, unfortunately, you see, when I gave those or when I tweeted those two tweets, which became the subject matter of contempt proceedings against me, all that I was doing was to critique what I felt was going wrong with the Supreme Court. In one of the tweets, I pointed out that it is very, I just expressed my anguish at the fact that while the Supreme Court was in lockdown mode and functioning only through video conferencing with very few cases being listed and heard, and that too in a very unsatisfactory way, at that very time, the Chief Justice, who was responsible for the administrative functioning of the Supreme Court, he was seen to be sitting on a very expensive motorcycle in a public place belonging to a BJP leader without any mask. The second tweet was where I said that when historians look back to see how democracy has been destroyed in this country without even a formal emergency, they will note the role of the Supreme Court and particularly the role of the last 4 Chief Justices. Now, that is also an expression of my opinion about what has gone wrong with our democracy, with our judiciary, and the role of the last 4 Chief Justices in allowing the destruction of our democracy in the last 6 years. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court felt that these tweets constituted an attempt to denigrate and destroy the dignity of the court and destroy public confidence in the judiciary, etc. And therefore, they held me guilty of very serious contempt and ultimately imposed a punishment of 1 rupee fine. And in the absence of that, 3 months in jail and 3 years from being barred from practicing in the Supreme Court. Now, that's the problem with this particular part of the contempt law. See, contempt of court has broadly 2 parts: civil contempt, which means disobedience of a court's order, and criminal contempt. Criminal contempt again has 2 parts. You see, there's no problem with civil contempt. Court's orders should be obeyed. If they are disobeyed, there should be some punishment against that. Criminal contempt has 2 parts. One is interference with court proceedings or with the administration of justice. This also, there is no problem. For example, if a person doesn't allow the court to proceed, dances on a judge's table, or if a person threatens a judge or threatens a witness that if you decide in a particular way or depose in a particular way, I will do this or that to you, that is certainly interference with court proceedings or with the administration of justice, and therefore that also should be punishable. The problem is with the second part of criminal contempt, which is scandalizing the court or lowering the authority of the court. Now, this is something which is not defined. It's very vague. Any criticism of the court or a judge can be treated by that court or that judge to be scandalous in nature or lowering the authority of the court, etc., which is what they did in the case of my tweets. So, and in this jurisdiction, the judges sit as the accuser, the prosecutor, and the judge. Therefore, it's a very dangerous jurisdiction, and that is why it has been done away with in almost all civilized countries. It survives in India. We filed a petition challenging it on the ground that it is too vague and undefined, and it's a very dangerous power to give to somebody who sits as a judge in his own cause in this jurisdiction. Unfortunately, that petition filed by Mr. N. Ram, Mr. Arun Shori, and I was also listed before the same judge who was dealing with my contempt cases, that is Justice Arun Mishra, same bench. And therefore, we had to withdraw it because we knew their views already. And we were given permission to file it in some high court, which we will. But that's one aspect of the contempt of court law which needs to be reformed. Now, now coming to public interest litigation. See, public interest litigation is a very, very important instrument which has been fashioned by the Supreme Court. And the primary basis of that is their interpretation of Article 21, which is a very expansive interpretation, where they say that the right to life and liberty does not merely mean the right to live an animal life, but the right to live with dignity, which means that every citizen must be given and provided by the state at least basic medical services, at least basic education, at least food, water, shelter, etc. So, and they have also held that the right to live in a fair environment, in a corruption-free society, is also part of the right to life and liberty. And while exercising the jurisdiction of the court to ensure that people are given all these things which are needed to live with dignity, the court started passing orders on public interest cases or public interest issues brought before it, initially on matters relating to environmental protection, thereafter on matters relating to the civil rights of people, thereafter on matters relating to socio-economic rights of people, and thereafter on matters relating to corruption and accountability of public servants. Apart from this, one other further expansion of this public interest jurisdiction, public interest litigation jurisdiction, was to even pass orders for institutional reforms. For example, when they felt that corruption has to be investigated by the CBI, and the CBI was controlled by the government, therefore they said, unless we free the CBI from excessive government control, we will not be able to deal with corruption. The CBI will not be able to investigate corruption in high places if they are controlled by those very people whose corruption they are supposed to investigate. So they passed orders in that Vinit Narayan case, or that Hawala case as it is called, for institutional reforms in order to make the CBI more independent. The same thing they did in that Prakash Singh's case for police reforms, because it was found that the police was also being excessively controlled by the government and being used as an instrumentality for harassing its political opponents, for not investigating cases against itself, because the police is supposed to be investigating crimes, and so on. So therefore, they passed a series of orders for institutional reforms of the police. Unfortunately, those orders which were passed 14 years ago in 2006 have still not been implemented till today, with the result that the police in most places in the country still functions as a political instrument used by the ruling government in order to harass people. Today, the Delhi police is being used to harass the anti-CAA activists, who were totally peaceful activists, some of the finest activists, just because they were opposing something which the government wanted to push through. Same way, the National Investigating Agency is being used to harass some of the finest activists in the country, human rights activists in the country, like Sudha Bharadwaj, Anand Tumle, who were merely fighting for the human rights of people. The NIA has now arrested them on some absurd charges, obviously at the instance of the government. So these are still continuing problems which we need to solve. We have been going to the court saying that, look, your orders for police reforms have not been implemented. Please take contempt action against these ministers and these governments, etc. But unfortunately, the court has not acted on that. We need police, we need institutional reforms even in the election commission, because unfortunately today the election commission has also become an instrument of the government, is no longer independent. And part of the reason is that the election commissioners are appointed by the government, and there is no broad-based independent committee to select the election commissioners, with the result that highly compromised and partisan people are being appointed election commissioners, and the election commission has become an instrumentality of the ruling party. So we need many more PILs of all kinds. For example, the right to work, the right to employment should be a right which people should have. So a NREGA type of scheme where at least one person from every family is guaranteed 100 days employment at minimum wages in rural areas, that should be extended to all adults, and it should be increased to at least 180 days in a year. That's a basic minimum right of every citizen, every adult in this country, to at least get employment on minimum wages for at least half the year. So that should also be the subject matter of a future PIL. But you see, unfortunately, what the success of these PILs depend very critically on the independence of the judiciary from the government. Because in all these cases, the orders that need to be passed by the Supreme Court are usually orders which the government resists. And therefore, the orders have to be passed despite the opposition of the government. And therefore, you need the judiciary to be independent. In order to do this PIL jurisdiction effectively, we need a very independent judiciary. Unfortunately, one of the major problems today is that in this kind of almost fascist and very strong government that we have had in this country for the last 6 years, the Supreme Court's independence seems to have been compromised. And that is why we are seeing that either important PILs or important cases such as the petitions regarding electoral bonds or about challenging the CAA or challenging the abolition of Article 370 or conversion of Kashmir into a union territory, these are not being heard. And even those which have been heard, all the orders are going in favor of the government, like in the Rafale case or the Ayodhya case, etc. Orders which to my mind are totally wrong, but they have gone in favor of the government. And in my view, because the independence of the Supreme Court today has been compromised. So therefore, the success of PILs in future will depend critically on to what extent we can rescue the judiciary or the Supreme Court from its current crisis. And its current crisis indeed is the lack of independence. And one of the reasons for that is because the Chief Justice has enormous powers as master of roster. He can decide which politically sensitive case is to be heard by which bench. And since the predilections and affiliations of judges are known, Therefore, if the Chief Justice comes under the control of the government, he can virtually get every politically sensitive case decided in the way the government wants it to be decided. This is a serious problem which Justice A.P. Shah recently wrote about, that we need to do away with this power of one person, that is the Chief Justice alone, to decide which case is to be heard by which bench. This power, firstly, the power to allocate benches by jurisdictions should be vested in at least the senior most 5 judges together. Secondly, if there are, say, 4 benches dealing with a particular kind of case, they need to go randomly to any of those 4 benches. So these are certain reforms which are required in the judiciary. Of course, the judiciary requires many more reforms. We need to make the judiciary more accessible to the people, because today common people do not have the funds to engage any lawyer. We need to have a simplified system whereby people can access the courts without lawyers. The Gram Nyayalayas were supposed to be such courts, but they have not been implemented. Secondly, we need quicker disposal of cases, for which we need more courts and better judges, for which we also need a better system of selecting judges. We need to have a proper, robust system of accountability of judges, a proper in the hands of the government. Government should have no role to play in giving post-retirement jobs to judges. So therefore, all these reforms are required. And for that, we will need to have a people's movement for judicial reforms, because neither the government nor the existing judiciary is interested in these judicial reforms. Unless there is public pressure by way of people's movement on judicial reforms, these reforms will not take place. So those are certain things that need to be done. This is all that I wanted to say. I again congratulate the All India Catholic Union, and my best wishes for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prashant Bhushan. Before we proceed, may I request a gentleman who is on screen right now to switch off his audio system, please. Because the audio system is switched on. If you are doing something, you will come on the screen. Only the speakers will come on the screen. So my request once again to all the participants to keep their sound system muted. Before I request Dr. John Dayal, a respected senior member and national past president of All India Catholic Union, I would like to thank Mr. Prashant Bhushan for being so much in detail. It's like attending a classroom. I wish I had recorded. I hope Mr. Rafael D'Souza recorded what you have said. And sir, if it is possible, if you have a written material, please email it to Mr. Rafael D'Souza. He will share with us. I would like to talk about what judges commented on Saturday. And the judges actually accused people like us becoming an activist in social media. We are criticizing the judgments. But I fail to understand the judge did not realize. I understand he's going to be the next Chief Justice of India, that this has happened recent. Why isn't that people like us who were there even earlier centuries or 10 years or 5 years before us, they never spoke about the judgment any time because it was not needed. Today, if people are speaking about judgment, because it is needed. So therefore, now inviting Dr. John Dayal, he doesn't need an introduction to this All India Catholic Union, but I must say that in respect of him, he is the most popular Christian face in our country who fights for the human rights in our country, and also a very good political activist today we have in our country. He's been a member of the National Integration Council, a good, true representative of the Catholic Church and the Christian community in India. And as I said, he has held the national president of All India Catholic Union. He's an outspoken opposition to the communal polarization and the spread of hatred between religious communities. Of course, we all know that he has been a foreign correspondent and a war correspondent in the Middle East, Northeast, South Asia, and Europe. His last assignment as a journalist, if I understand rightly, he was the editor CEO of the Delhi Midday. And he's been a treasurer of the Editors Guild of India, the largest body of journalists, I understand. And he continues to provide commentary on behalf of the community as well as on behalf of those voiceless people and analyze in print and on national TV and radio. He has had many governing boards in Delhi University and also been a visiting teacher at several universities in North India. We all know that he has been an instrumental in first in initiating a fact-finding team and then be part of it and visited across the country along with another famous gentleman, Mr. Harsh Manda. He's been the founder of the most important body along with Archbishop Alan Delastic in late 90s, United Christian Forum for Human Rights. I can go on and speak about Dr. John Dayal, but I also understand he has to leave for another TV channel to represent us once again. Dr. John Dayal, may I invite you and request you to speak, please?
That leaves me very little time.
Sir, you may take your own time.
Before I greet and thank Prashant Bhushan, a dear friend, Justice Rebellor, another dear friend, Father Cedric, I must say never believe Wikipedia, because according to them, I have 2 wives and 5 children. I must assure you I have just the one wife and 1 son and a daughter. So one mustn't go by the written word. But this is a serious matter. And yet we must laugh lest we keep on crying so hard that we can't see reality because of the curtain of our tears. It is good, therefore, to be grounded, but also to be detached and to be able to look at what is happening, while thanking Prashant, to be also, in a way, remembering the work his father did as the law minister, at the time as a lawyer at the Supreme Court. But also, again, E.C. Michael, you have talked of a Supreme Court where we did not have to criticize, but that's not true. We've always had occasion with one judge or the other, a maverick, somebody stepping out of line, somebody who's a coward, somebody who covets something. They've always been there, but they never decided the majority ruling, barring the one during the emergency. Barring that, it was the sane voice of the court that always held sway, which was recorded, which students of law, with practitioners of law, with international courts and international jurists quote. That was the substance of the court. I do recall once I was in the Supreme Court when a critical issue of Article 30 and its impact and the rights of religious minorities and the institutions was being discussed. The Christian community had a once law minister as our counsel. I believe he charged at that time, and this was years and decades ago, a lakh of rupees per appearance, it seems. And he wouldn't open his mouth. The judgment came. The bench was very generous. They cupped their hands in the shape of a cup or a bowl. And the chief said, Christian institutions are the crucible of nation building. He said that. But when the judgment came, we discovered that with that pat had also come the razor blade. And now, technically speaking, Christian institutions can not take more than 50%. And therefore, everybody else has a right to study in a Christian institution. And so it should be really. I want to confine myself to time. And therefore, I will sort of read out from the screen something I felt deeply about, but edited it to read more coherently. And I begin as follows. Advocate Prashant Bhushan has paid his debt to the Supreme Court of India today, giving the 1 rupee the highest court in the land wanted as fine for pointing a finger at it. But surely the judge who ordered this fine will never be able to atone for the damage he has done, not just to the court, but to the concept of justice. There is no contempt of court in spelling out what the people have now accused him of. Among them, fellow retired judges of the Supreme Court and of the High Courts, senior advocates who are still in their prime, and the vast population which may not understand much law, which does not have degrees in juridical sciences, but which knows right from wrong. And I think that is the core of law, the knowledge of what is right and what is wrong, and to be able to find as often as possible for the right and against the wrong. And that retired judge, therefore, today stands accused, and correctly so, I think, of ensuring that his siblings may rise high in service, that the truth will never come about how another young judge, Mr. Loya, died, and the truth will never come about how a former Minister of Gujarat, a person I knew well, was assassinated. But this webinar, and I thought I should remind everybody, including myself, is not about the perfidy or the cowardice of one man or the bravery of another, a man called Prashant Bhushan, in the face of the might of the Supreme Court, and indirectly, therefore, of the political forces that now are in control and full flow in India. It is about the future. Will we be able to approach the courts to seek remedies for ills that plague society, for social viruses that may attack us or attack the Constitution in the near and in the distant future? That, my friends, is the question. And the second question that follows immediately is, will there be brave lawyers like Prashant and Colin Gonsalves and many others to take up our cases? Not always pro bono. Of course, I personally am grateful for every lawyer who takes up my cases pro bono. But will they have the courage, or will they, forgetting their ethics and their moral and legal duty, be so frightened of administration and political leaders as to desert us, leave us at the mercy of the powerful and the rich? The rich control the powerful, that we all know. And will they be brave judges? The Loya case makes us wonder. The day before yesterday, we were in a big webinar on Kandamal. Justice Gopala Gowda, another retired judge of the Supreme Court, was with us, and he held us spellbound, like Prashant did today, for about half an hour, telling us about constitutional law. And in answer to a question which I posed him, he said, I asked him, will the Supreme Court ever be the one I knew when I was a reporter 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Or will we now be doomed, let us say, for 20 years till somebody even more evil becomes Chief Justice, as has been already arranged? And Justice Gopala Gowda held out a ray of hope. I mean, he knows many of the judges personally. All retired judges know quite a lot of the younger judges because they've seen them as High Court judges, as senior lawyers. So they know 20 years back and they know 20 years into the future. And he said, John, hold on to hope, because the Supreme Court, Justice Gowda said, will soon enough assert itself. The judges will again come together and will ensure that the constitutional high places that the apex court is always occupied in India's democratic scheme of things will again be its. I really, as a Catholic, pray that Justice Gowda is right. Maybe I would still wonder, because Justice Gowda is also human, maybe his forecast is not right, but sure as hell, I'm going to pray that he's right. But at present, it's lawyers such as Prashant Bhushan or Colin Gonsalves, another friend of ours, who are hounded by government and by armies of trolls. And today I was running through the internet and I was appalled. All of them are being targeted by this well-trained army of trolls, financed, trained, practiced since 2013 when they started work in the elections, and they targeted people. They are at full force asking that these great lawyers that we have, one of whom addressed us just now, be arrested, that their accounts be seized, their accounts be examined. What for? Because they're defending people who these trolls and the political masters think are enemies of the nation. Young men who are being arrested every day in the middle of the night, activists, lawyers, medical doctors, poets, for heaven's sake, 80-year-olds being arrested, and anybody who defends them has also to be arrested because he is, in a way, upsetting the scheme of things that these people want to have. I say that, BD, please, I say this with the trepidation that I have as a Catholic, because we are a pretty timorous community, partly because of tradition. We are very peace-loving, partly because of history. We have ancient history, and we have been always non-violent by and large, although some of us have been hung, I must say. The first person to hang for treason in Goa against the Portuguese was a Catholic, a fact not very much known to many people, but such is history. We've also been timorous because of our training, As lay faithful, we joke in the Catholic Union that our job seems to be to pray, to pay our weekly and our monthly charges to the church, and to obey the clergy, the bishops, the cardinal. We do all that, of course, and we do it willingly and gladly. But the fact remains, we are timorous. We are loath to challenge the government. We are loath to come out on the street, unless it is the rape of a nun or Contempt, of course, then even the most fearful child will come out. But by and large, it takes courage from the guts to say, I stand to challenge the law of the land. I stand to challenge the Prime Minister. I stand to say truth to power. I stand to tell the Chief Justice, I'm going to ask you for a constitutional bench to review the judgment you have given as a 3-member bench. That takes courage. It also takes money, but I'm not talking of the money part of it. It takes courage. What if we're wrong? What will happen? Will there be retribution? The fear of retribution. Now, those are things that keep us quiet, that keep us, I will not use the word cowardly. It's a terrible word. It can be used for somebody else. But it does prevent us from being the sort of bold people that Jesus was. That is the boldness we require. We also are, barring Raphael and others who are trained in law, we are unknown in the ways of courts. We are untraveled in the long corridors of the judicial process. And this has also, in a way, kept us from exercising a birthright, the right every citizen has to demand justice. In Kandamal, where there were thousands of cases and so few were tried, where so many people were raped, and the victim was again demeaned in court, where she was in an identification parade, identifying her rapist, and the magistrate was recording that the nun failed to recognize anybody. We went to the Supreme Court to get the magistrate chastised. Mercifully, the Supreme Court chastised the magistrate, and then the process was recorded, and still not all guilty have been punished. We are not really, we don't know how to challenge the court. I remember Graham Stuart Staines was burnt alive with his sons. The High Court, the Session Court, gave Dara Singh a Bajrang Dal man death. The High Court upheld Graham Staines' widow, and all of us, I am personally opposed to the death penalty. We say we don't like death. Life for him. The Supreme Court gave him life. But the judge at the moment, who was writing the judgment, what did he say? He almost said that Graham Staines and his sons deserved death because they were converting. Those were his words. I paraphrase, of course. But shown of my anger, those were his words in the cold black and white of legal parlance. He began by saying Graham Staines was a converter and how it had angered the RSC. Now, we had a national protest and the Supreme Court had to release, they had to delete that sentence. Can be done. And that is the what. Another case was, of course, when they declared Good Friday as a working day and we had to go to court. They said, no. It may be a working day for most people, after all doctors work and fire brigade people work and police work. But Catholics and Christians and others who want to go to church may not have to take leave. It is a holiday for them. The court so ruled, but not before the registrar tried to play funny. So I'm saying that these things, once we assert ourselves, can happen. We have not yet asserted ourselves to get the government to withdraw the second name they're given to the day we celebrate as the birthday of Christ, Christmas. Blessed Christmas, happy Christmas, joyous Christmas. Somebody wants to call it Good Governance Day, according to me, and I said it then. Every day should be Good Governance Day. Why wait for the 25th of December? I think one of these days we'll challenge that phrase be deleted, excised from government documentation. We have a deep and vital interest in the independence of the Supreme Court, which Prashant so eloquently did. We have a deep and vital vested interest in a powerful judiciary, which he spoke of, a judiciary and individual judges with a living conscience. This is what we learn in Sunday school, and this is what we profess on a Sunday. We want a conscience. We examine our conscience every Sunday, and we confess to our sins. We are contrite about sins, and we seek absolution. A conscience, a living conscience, is so critical for a living society, for a living nation, which India is. This vested interest is as citizens, of course, but it is also as a religious minority. People ask me, John, why are you so active? Now you're old, retired. I said, no, children. More than the children, I have grandchildren. And I hope they will have children of their own. My vested interest in India runs already into generations, as in the Old Testament, without the patriarchy. It already runs deep into the future of India. And this vested interest, therefore, in a living judiciary, which will also live and grow and have a conscience also, and will not be prey or subservient or slave or vassal to whoever is powerful. Somebody may come who's far more powerful than Mr. Modi. Who knows in the future? Mrs. Gandhi was far more powerful, though in retrospect, more benign too. Somebody may come, but we want a judiciary which will stand up to them. And this is also as religious minorities, and especially as Christians, or because of our small numbers, feel ourselves indefensible unless protected by the garment of the Constitution, this quach, this armor. And this garment is being rent asunder. Constitutional guarantees are being eroded, and eroded fast. Even the core, the essentials of the Constitution, we fear, are under attack. Tomorrow, they may just do anything. President of the Catholic Union mentioned the Dalit issue. You're closing a very fundamental right. The independence of a country, the democracy, is like judging rice by one grain. And religious freedom is that grain, which judges how you treat all other freedoms. Because this can be, from the minorities, a threat. Islamophobia is rampant today. Muslims, even at the most largest number that you want to give them, are still much less than 20%. Together with Christians and Sikhs and all that, we are not fully 25%. What do anybody have to fear from us? And yet, Islamophobia, Christophobia, the fear of conversions, they abuse Mother Teresa is blasphemy, it's sacrilege. And yet they abuse her. I am proud to be called a rice Christian, if they want to call me that. We are all rice Christian. Rice is a good food. South India thrives on it, and so does North India. But you can get the point. They're weaponized. They closed doors. FCR, they closed doors. In the lockdown recently, and this I'm not tired of telling, we have fed tens of lakhs, crore I must say, and more people, just the Catholic Church, and an equal number by the non-Catholic Church on money. We are a poor community. We cannot afford to give the church what we should, but it was the FCR, the money that came in from Germany, from America, from England, from Italy, from people of goodwill all over the world. We converted that money into food for the poor, not for ourselves, as we do all the time. And the FCR is now being weaponized, and the Christian community in particular, and the Catholic community most particularly, is the major victim of this weapon. And now I come to the last weapon, is education. The national education policy, and we run together with other communities and denominations, maybe 50,000 institutions. Not as much as the RSS, but 50,000 is a big number. These are institutions of excellence. The NEP, according to me, and maybe people may differ, bodes ill for the minorities, it bodes even more ill for the Dalits, and it bodes the worst for the tribals. These are people. We cannot allow this. And therefore, my dear Prashant and judges and lawyers, we come to you again in the hope that when we come to you seeking redress in the courts, when we knock at the doors of the Supreme Court to look at statutes and the IPC and others to remove everything that is communal from existing law and from future law, that we will find warmth and acceptance from you, that you will welcome us, because we want to use through you the PIL as a corrective. We want to use through you, Prashant, the PIL as a curative. And dear Prashant, I want to use the PIL as a creative instrument to intervene in the national discourse, to expand the scope of liberties, the national endeavor to secure equality, fraternity, and justice to everyone, howsoever marginal he or she may be in the scheme of things, government. I hope this seminar gives us courage. And Prashant, I want to thank you in these words only. Your presence gives us courage. That is the most important. Thank you, gentlemen, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir, Dr. John Dayal. As ever, always been a pleasure to listen to you, and you actually represented us as All India Catholic Union in a best voice and gave us a lot of input. Before I invite Father Cedric Prakash, another big Catholic name in the India, in fact, may I request all the participants who would like to raise questions to write in their chat box. The questions will be selected and read out. And also, you can be specific to whom you are wanting these questions to be raised. We have a question answer session for about 20 minutes. So whoever would like to ask question, please write down your questions in the chat box, and also keep your audio muted, switched off. Father Cedric Prakash, JD sir, you need to switch off your sound. John Dayal sir. Father Cedric Prakash actually belongs to Gujarat province of those Jesuit fathers, but we all know that he belongs to all of us. Father Cedric
Holy
Prakash,
Mary,
Cedric
Mother of
Prakash.
God, pray for the sinners and the half dead.
Someone is praying here. Can you mute your
Holy
sound?
Mary, Mother of God, pray for the sinners and the half dead.
DP sir, please switch off your sound
Mother
system.
of God, pray for the sinners and the half dead.
Who is DP sir here? Please switch off your sound system.
Holy Mary, Mother of
Alvin, I had requested you to unmute all the participants except for the speakers. Please maintain that. Father Cedric Prakash. I know about you that you are internationally known human rights activist, and you have always worked for reconciliation and peace, and your focus has always been on advocacy. We read and listen to you most often and most of the time, and since the time, especially from the time of 2002, we are well connected, and you also set up started an organization called Prashant. So we have been very proud to be part of it. We know what you did following Gujarat riots and how you testified before the U.S. Commission and interreligious freedoms. So therefore, there are many things. You have received many awards, something like Mother Teresa International Award for Social Justice, Legion of Honor by the President of French Republic, the Kabir Puskar from President of India, and recently a Lifetime Achievement Award from Delhi Minorities Commission, where I was a member from 2011 to 14. Father, very proud to would be listening to you. I know we have already taken a lot of your time, but please do take your 20 minutes of speaking. Yeah, thank you, Father Cedric Prakash. Father, unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me now? Hello. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, Father, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, I want to thank you, Dr. A.C. Michael, for the introduction, for the welcome. I want to thank the All India Catholic Union, especially the President, Mr. Lancy Tikuna, the Bombay Catholic Sabha, their Public Affairs Committee, especially Advocate Rafael D'Souza, and all concerned for organizing this important webinar. My dear friend Prashant Bhushan has already given us plenty of food for thought. Then John Dayal has continued, also another dear friend, in his usual eloquent and very, very perceptive style. Yeah, we have a very important subject today for each one of us, and that is can one be convicted for contempt, and what is the impact on future PILs? I would like to kind of make my presentation under different C's. The first is Constitution. Prashant ji has already spoken a lot about it. I would like to highlight just Article 19 and Article 25 of the Constitution, and it has its parallels in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 19 is there, just an Article 19, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and we have Article 25, which is there in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We are talking about a great constitution, a fantastic preamble, which was given to the people of India, years ago, on the 26th of November 1949, and then we became a republic in January 26, 1950. But it is hailed as one of the greatest constitutions, both in letter and spirit, in the world. And we have these two articles. But what has been happening in these last, we are talking about the last 6 years, yes, but very especially in this immediate past. And it's a sad state of affairs. Now, one of the things that these articles which I referred to give us is this dimension of conscience. Am I allowed the freedom of my conscience? It's a question every thinking citizen should ask themselves, and every thinking citizen should ask maybe the judges, wherever they are, in the lower courts, the high courts, and even in the Supreme Court. Do I have a conscience? And for that matter, does the judiciary of today have a conscience? We need to ask that. It's given there. It's given in the articles which I referred to. How do we understand this dimension of the whole Constitution, which gives us the freedom of Constitution is not mere of conscience, not merely of speech and expression. If I have a conscience, if I'm a thinking citizen, then I must, as Prashant has already said, have the ability to critique it. Critique is not something negative. I might have the most perfect road. I'm driving on it. If there is a pothole in the middle of the road, as a thinking citizen, I have to say that there is a pothole on the road. That's all. Don't tell me, look at the rest of the road and see how good it is. That for me is all crap. And I think we should go beyond, we should transcend and have the ability to critique the system. Should I be punished for critiquing a system? I think is the most ridiculous thing to be happening in a democracy. It is the most ridiculous thing to be happening in with the constitution that speaks about justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. So, how do I critique a system and say very clearly and unequivocally that I have the right to critique that system? Paulo Freire, the famous Brazilian educator, spoke about the pedagogy of the oppressed in that famous book, and he used this phrase, and that is my fourth C, critical consciousness. How do I bring about this critical consciousness into the world I live in, into the society that literally is mentoring me, helping me to grow? But at the same time, how do I create an ethic which ensures that there is a critical consciousness in the world I live in, and that people are not merely made morons, and that the Gaudy media today does not try to tell us that you are morons, you're unable to think for yourself. And this is what is happening. The so-called educated people in our country today, those so-called people with degrees, the upper classes today are not able to see a simple thing, that the whole thing, the whole reality of the country is very, very conveniently defocused. We are made to think about some film star, whether he has committed suicide or murder. There are the shenanigans of some film actresses, and it's all there. People are going for TRPs. Everybody is trying to read about them and so on, when the reality is the minus 23.9% in our GDP. The unemployment, the whole survey on the unemployment reality has been stalled. They don't want us to talk about the growing unemployment in the country. We are not talking about the big corruption. Prashantji has done plenty where the Rafale deal is concerned. And even some of our Christians, have been clapping hands because there at the launch of the Rafale jet the other day, some Christian read from the Bible and clapped hands. I mean, how can you do it? A thinking Christian will not clap hands for that. We have a God who understands what corruption is, who knows that these jets are meant to kill other people. And you cannot be praying over these machines, over a corrupt deal. No thinking Christian will be doing that. And for that matter, even clapping hands and say, finally we brought our God into the public domain. No, that was a show. That was a sham. It had nothing to do with prayer. It had nothing to, and people are sending on WhatsApp, in the WhatsApp university, and thinking it's good to pray for anything. I am a priest, and for anyone and everyone all the time. But the point is to invoke God's blessings on a thing which is a no-go, which is a corrupt deal. I mean, our God is a God of justice. We should realize that. We cannot pray to Him for the legitimization of corruption, of wrongdoing. We cannot pray to Him for that. Then we are talking about critical consciousness. Once you are visible and vocal, you take a stand, as we have seen the two tweets of Prashant, then there is contempt. The court is rattled. How can you speak about us in that manner? How can you tweet about us? As a citizen, I definitely can comment on any judgment. You know, you want to haul me on contempt of court, do haul me, but give me a chance to tell you why I am saying this. If there are justices who are corrupt, isn't it my right and my duty to expose that justice who's corrupt, who's getting a big deal, a lot of kickbacks, who gets a promotion, who's made a member of parliament, who will be crowned and given everything as possible? You know, so you just pass favorable judgments. And the people of India are not morons, are not unthinking people. People of India can think, and you slam something which is a contempt of court, but we have the right to prove ourselves and give us a bench that is going to be objective, that is going to be impartial, that is going to go both by the spirit and the letter of the law. And then, of course, as we have seen recently, there is conviction. Our great friend Umar Khalid has been arrested last night at 11 o'clock. Okay. And there is these many others who have been implicated on incitement and so on, when actually the ones who have been giving hate speeches, the ones who have been fomenting division and violence are going scot-free, both with immunity and with impunity. And this is happening. So you have a nexus between those who control, those who are in this regime, those who control power, and you can literally do what you want. There is conviction. And one repeat for me, I wrote a big article. It is the symbol of a new India that, as Prashant again says, we need to create a movement in this country and finally ensure that the voice of the people is heard. For this, we need a lot of courage. We have it in the United States. Today, you look at the editorial and the op-eds of any objective newspaper or magazine. They have that First Amendment, which clearly says that Congress shall make no laws abridging free speech. There is free speech. What are we afraid of? Whom are we afraid of? They are going to come and knock at our doors. For this, we need to demonstrate a lot of courage. And that, I think, is very important. We are frightened. They have created fear among us. We are we are the All India Catholic Union and so on. Mostly laity, as Lancy Dicon has said at the beginning, is 101 years old this year. A great organization. But unfortunately, those maybe, and I know there are quite a few priests and nuns, those of us who are priests and nuns and other parts of the clergy and hierarchy are frightened. We are frightened of our property. We are frightened of our FCRA, of our money, of our possessions. And the point is, we don't realize that the one thing that Jesus has told us, fear no one. Very especially those who can harm your body. Okay? He said, take a stand. And he took a stand against, the scribes and the Pharisees, the powerful of his own times, the Herods and the Pilots of his own times. And he has used words like a brood of vipers, whitened sepulchres. He has called them all kinds of words. That is our God. And as Christians, for those of us who are here, those of us who profess to be disciples of Jesus, what we have to give this India today is the possibility of witness that we Christian, the All India Catholic Union, the Bombay Catholic Sabha, the others who have organized this great webinar will show a rare and raw courage that we are not pushovers, that we don't care for our materiality, for the property that we have, for the money that maybe we have, but we care about what is happening to our country, to the poor and the marginalized, to the Constitution of India, to truth and justice, to the fact that corruption and communalism and all that which negates the very idea of India, the very idea of our citizenship, is being thrown to shreds in no uncertain terms. Today, I'm hoping that a webinar, many of us have been at webinars day in and day out in these last almost 6 months of this lockdown. It has become a new way of society, a new way of the church. But we are looking forward to the time when this pandemic goes away and that we will come out on the streets. Look at the way they have been harassing and hounding those who have taken a stand on the CAA and the NRC and the NPR. You know, it's a most ridiculous and anti-human, anti-citizenship, and anti-constitutional way by which they are investigating people, incarcerating them, foisting false cases on them. A young Dalit activist student, there, Suvarna Salve in Mumbai, is asked to give a surety of 50 lakhs of rupees. I mean, and those who speak out, those who say that there is corruption in the system, we had a businessman in UP just a couple of days ago, they just killed. So because there are powerful people who are ruling us today, and that we need to be able to take a stand on all that is wrong in this country today. So great for a webinar like this, because we have to look at the future of our PILs. Will PIL stand the test of time? Am I able, as an ordinary citizen, file a public interest litigation to say that this is happening? I want to do something about it. Or will a fine be imposed on me, as some judges have done, saying that they are frivolous PILs? Conviction for contempt? For what? Just because I take a stand on what is wrong in the system? Just because I want to address what is systemic and endemic? No way, my dear friends. So once again, I would like to highlight the 7 C's, that not SEAS, but the letter C, the Constitution, which is great, which is sacred, which belongs to me. I need to mainstream it. I need to take, to internalize it, to have an ownership of it. My conscience, my conscience pricks me. I need to speak out. I need to be visible and vocal. When I'm visible and vocal, I critique the system. I critique what is systemic. I need to create that mass of critical consciousness in society that this is what is happening. People are dying today because of starvation. Farmers are committing suicide. And which of our glorified media is highlighting this? Contempt. Contempt what? About what? Just because I say that this is wrong, I have a right to say that this is wrong. We need, as Christians, to play a prophetic voice. Conviction? Who convicts me? And for what? And finally, I need to have the courage of my convictions to stand up, to speak out, to take a stand for truth and justice in this country. I've just finished writing an article. We must arise. We must arise. A big campaign which was started, on the 3rd anniversary of our dear friend Gauri Lankesh. But we need to arise as a community of Catholics, as friends, with all women and men of goodwill, with like-minded individuals, with great lawyers like Prashantji, people like Justice Rebellor, who's going to speak after me, John, Dayal, and the others. We need to take a stand, because only then we can truly say, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Thank you very much, and God bless each one of you.
Thank you, Father Cedric, for keeping to the time and being brief on what you have to speak on. Without wasting my time, let me invite Justice Rebellor. There are a few lines about Justice Rebellor, though he's well known to us. He's been a former Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court. Judge has also been a part of Bombay High Court as a judge. Been a member of a Legislative Assembly of Goa, Daman and Diu. He's been a lecturer in law at the Salgaonkar Law College. Was the president of Goa High Court Bar Association. Been advisory committee member for Mumbai Chamber of International Arbitration. Is now the advisory council member for University of Mumbai Law Academy, University of Mumbai. Justice Rebellor, please take your time as allotted for 20 minutes. May I please invite you to speak?
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Justice.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks to the organizers and to the speakers who were there before me. I would start on a lighter note. After hearing the fiery speeches of the three speakers who have been before me, I would like to bring back the subject to where it is. But before that, hearing the comments all around about judges, you see, most lawyers think that judges are fools. And this is not something new. There was a former Chief Justice of the United States of America who went to a law school, to his former law school, alma mater, and asked the deacon down there, what do you teach your students now? Do you still teach them that judges are fools? And the reply was, no, sir. Now we teach them to learn for themselves. I only hope after my speech is concluded that you will learn for yourself as to what we as judges are. I have served as a lawyer for nearly 22 years, as a judge for 15 years, and now as an arbitrator. But like you and me, I am also shaken by what is happening around, which I will try to comment in the course of my speech. But I would like to divide the subject into two topics. I would first like to take the topic of PILs, the impact on future PILs, and then I will speak on the issue of conviction for contempt. Most of the audience over here, I assume, are lay persons, and they must have heard the word PIL again and again in the papers everywhere. But what actually is a PIL? A PIL is a to a class of cases brought to the courts by individuals or NGOs on behalf of persons or citizens whose fundamental rights were deprived, who were economically or socially backward, and who themselves could not approach the courts. In the 80s began this chapter on PILs. Who can approach the courts are basically individuals, NGOs, but those who have interest in the matter. That is the first thing about a PIL is that a person who approaches the court must himself does not have a stake in the matter. He must propound it on behalf of the marginalized and those whose rights have been deprived. The concept of PLI, as I said, emerged in the early 80s. But India was not the first of the countries where the PILs emerged. In the United Kingdom, there were what is known as organizations who used to espouse various causes, and these social organizations or CSOs, they used to get legal aid from the government in the UK, unlike NGOs or citizens in India. There also the government felt at a point of time that the NGOs, that the CSOs were taking too much advantage and wanted to cut down the financing to them. But that did not happen. In the United States, there's a concept called parens patria, whereby the state takes upon itself the task of taking up the causes where they affected matters like pollution. So we borrowed from these concepts and brought in what we call the concept of PIL. What is the main object of a PIL? The main object of PIL is accountability and legality. It requires an activist code to grant relief in such cases. You look at the legal system in India. The legal system in India, whether in the past or the present, is heavily weighed against the poor and the marginalized, the economically disadvantaged. To whom do these people go? These people mostly approach lawyers who are undertrained, not properly equipped, and the result is most of the time they lose these matters. So it is in these areas where when you have proper trained NGOs who come to the court and you have good pro bono lawyers who help these NGOs, that sometimes, many a time, the rights of the deprived and the marginalized find a voice in the courts. As the concept of PIL has grown, the governments are becoming afraid of PILs because they feel that the PILs are interfering in the right of administration, or the courts are issuing too many directions to them. On the other hand, courts feel, well, if the rights of citizens are affected, then who other than the courts must step in to protect those fundamental rights? These are the scenarios in which PILs have evolved. But a question which matters is, when courts intervene and help protect the rights of citizens, it is fine. But what happens when courts fail to act? When the courts still idle in the face of a large calamity, just like the migrants issue which we have faced, does it mean that we as citizens, all the citizens, have no right to speak or criticize the inaction of the courts in moving in such matter? And if such criticism is levied, does it mean that to those who criticize, the courts must issue a contempt notice? This is not the concept of justice. This is not a justice that I knew, and I believe this is not a concept of justice that most judges in the judiciary know. How did the Supreme Court introduce this new concept of PIL? Now, funnily in law, no person can approach the court unless you have what is called a locus standi. That means you must have a right in the matter. Unless you have a right in that matter, you cannot approach the court. That was a long-standing belief of the courts. In the 80s, We had a great judge. In fact, I call him the father of Asian students, Justice Krishna Iyer. Justice Krishna Iyer was dealing with the matter of a workers' union, what was known as the Kamgar fertilizer case, and where the corporation wanted to sell its assets, and the union said, no, you can't sell the assets because we have a right, you are depriving us of our jobs and opportunities. The matter was lost, but a law was laid down by Justice Krishna Iyer that irrespective of the fact that the union may not have a right, but they have an interest, and therefore once they have an interest, they have a right to approach the court, to intervene the court. In that matter, they are allowed to intervene. So for the first time, the rigors of locus removed, and the citizens were given the right to move the court. Then came the second time, bonded laborers. No, Article 23 of our Constitution prohibits begar. There was a law made in 1976 prohibiting bonded labor. But in spite of the laws, the evil practice continued. An organization known as the Bandi Mukti Morcha wrote a letter to a judge of the Supreme Court. That letter was treated by Justice Bhagwati as a petition, and various reliefs were being given. Thus was born the concept of a PIL, that NGOs, citizens approach on behalf of those citizens whose fundamental rights were affected and who, because of poverty or other like matters, could not move the Supreme Court. So this was how the concept of PIL developed. Now, how has the PIL jurisdiction evolved? It is not that overnight the PIL jurisdiction became what it is today. In the beginning, as I mentioned earlier, it was to espouse the fundamental rights of the poor, the deprived, the economically and socially deprived. But in the process on the way, and in these matters, courts, with all their failings, as you may hear, began issuing various directions. They issued directions directing governments to provide food grains to the poor. When I was Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court, a matter came before me where the government had a policy of dividing the poor within the poor. I issued a direction to the government to saying, if a man between a person who earns 50 rupees a day and a person who earns 75 rupees a day, both are equally poor, this must be given free food grains at a subsidized rate of free food grains. Then came protecting women from sexual harassment at their workplaces. All you must have heard of the Vishaka judgment. Then there were other judgments like providing for food for women who were pregnant, as also for lactating mothers. These were therefore steps that the Supreme Court took on its way. Then came the second step in the evolution of PILs, environment and ecology. There's an article in Indian Constitution, Article 48A, in the directive principles of state policy. Now, the directive principles, as all of us know, are not enforceable. In other words, no court, you cannot go to the court and tell the court, enforce the directive principle. Mr. Prashant Bhushan rightly pointed out to a case that why should not the right to employment be a fundamental right? The directive principles contain as a policy that people must be given employment, of course, within the economic means of the state. In one of my judgments, I did point out that judges are crying hoarse over a civil code over the right of a citizen to have his livelihood, to have work. What is more important to a man? Is it a common civil code or so therefore, though the great jurists in the Supreme Court, India was a party to various international conventions, like the Convention on Human Rights, the Convention on the Rights to Child, and various other rights. Now, the Supreme Court, in a number of judgments, said that these conventions must be read into Article 21, the right to life. And therefore, the concept of the PR was further broadened by making now the directive principle, which was so far a dead letter wood in the constitutional pages, now became active. The court started activating the judicial process. One of the first cases was of prawn farms in the state of Tamil Nadu. They were polluting the groundwater levels of the people down there. The court intervened and stopped the process so that the people have fresh drinking water. Then we had another great activist, Mr. M.C. Mehta, who fought a number of petitions in the Supreme Court, including fighting for the Aravalli range of hills in North India. The court there intervened at this stage and stopped the mining in the Aravalli hills. The court thereafter, again in a large number of matters, has been continuously monitoring the cutting down of forests all over India. And therefore, you will find that an activist court, I would call it, the courts of the 80s and the 90s were really activist courts which put forward and went forward in breathing life into Article 21. That was not the end. The next step which the court proceeded was in the matter of interfering with economic policies. Here there is a much larger debate whether the court is right and all of us know which court in the Dayal matters was cancellation of allotment of coal mines without auction, of spectrum to telephone companies by 40 policy, and then all of us know illegal mining in Goa, Karnataka, and Orissa. Not only that, the court said the right of the poor to have fresh drinking water is a fundamental right. That is the part of the earlier part of it. So therefore, the courts have evolved the concept of PR over a period of time, beginning with the fundamental rights of the deprived to ecology and environment, and finally to economic policies, so that the right of the people under Article 21 has some real meaning. Now, for example, some judges sometimes take a fancy and entertain all kinds of petitions. I must really confess that sometimes some judges are trigger happy. Now, one judge and the Supreme Court thought that he could direct the government to join all the rivers in India. Now, this was a huge case of studying the environmental impact, the ecological impact, the amount of water available, the economic aspects of it, and most of all, the political aspects of fights between the states. Now, for example, take the state of Punjab and Haryana. Today, Punjab and Haryana are fighting over the Bias, with Punjab farmers threatening that they will have a war if water is released to Haryana. We in Goa have a fight with Karnataka over what is called the Madai dispute. We have then a big dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu over the Kaveri, waters from the Kaveri. They are not idle issues which must be taken just for fancy. When you exercise the PI jurisdiction, it must be something that it is within the powers of the court to grant relief. And for the purpose of granting relief, it must have the necessary material, which in this case, the court did not have. And I will tell you an incident. We read in the newspapers that one high court, I will not name the high court, even intervened in the PIL petition in the case of having a fashion show. In the PIL has been good for the Constitution. PIL has seen several rights on various fronts given to the poor and the marginalized, and also to a large extent in cleansing the public system. Have the courts failed in exercising the PIL jurisdiction? Our memories are fresh. I think all of us, whether we are ordinary citizen, whether we are retired judges, or whether the judges who are sitting, a majority of us felt that the court failed in its most significant duty as the sentinel of the Constitution in moving ahead, in granting relief to the citizens who had approached the court on behalf of the migrants. What happened to the migrants? Overnight, a government declared everything, Bharat Bandh, everything is closed. No arrangements were made for food camps. No arrangement was made for shelter. No arrangements were made for health camps. All of a sudden, India came to a grinding halt. And you saw millions of citizens, never before after partition has India witnessed a mass exodus of citizens from one state to another, people trying to go home with a simple hope: if we have to die, let us die peacefully with our families. And we had a Supreme Court unmindful. They accepted the word of the Solicitor General of India saying that everything is under control. What was under control? They had not the Supreme Court to question the Solicitor General, file the material before us as to what steps you have taken to help those who are going to be affected. Even today, millions of people are without employment, have lost their jobs because industries were closed. And all that the government did was to say, under the Act, the Medical Concern Act, asking the employer to pay the wages. Now, Supreme Court has stated that, and rightfully. How do you expect a struggling industry to get money and to pay its workers with there was some things, and this was something, it is only after judges, citizens, the press and the like finally raised their voices did the Supreme Court awake. but it awoke too late. It awoke after the damage, irreparable damage had been done. If you recollect the horror scenes of people walking barefooted, bare-soled, and you would have seen their on the WhatsApp messages, the soles of their feet had disappeared. You would have seen cases of people dying, people sleeping on railway lines exhausted and been crushed by moving trains. But the conscience of a court did not rise on those occasions. When it moved, as I said earlier, it moved too late for anything really good on behalf of for the citizens. And believe me, contrary to what the Supreme Court did, there were many high courts that intervened and issued directions. And those of us who remember the dark days of the emergency, when the fundamental rights were curtailed, suppressed, the Supreme Court said, yes, the government has the right to suppress your liberties, even when nobody can question. It is in the high courts that the spirit of liberty was kept alive. Various high courts rose to the occasion and said, nothing doing, we still a few current rights the power to grant relief to citizens. The Bombay High Court did it, and many other high courts also did it. So therefore, many a time when you the courts, sometimes you do feel that after sitting on the temple of justice, after fighting the administrative powers that may be, and believe me, all governments want to encroach on the powers of the court. You cannot signal out any government. Maybe there may be degrees. One may be the worse than the other. But no government wants an activist court. No government wants a court which will tell them that they are wrong and that their actions should be struck down. Now with that we come to the issue that has brought us over here. Of Mr. Bush not understands the right every citizen in India stand up platform as the question is on this right. Now there are certain rights in man which are inalienable. They are not given by governments. These are rights because you are a human being, because you are a person, because you are endowed with intelligence, because you inherit this earth, and in this earth you have to communicate with these people, speak out your mind. And these rights have been recognized by the constitutions. Universal human right was recognized in his dissenting judgment in the 18th case, Justice Khanna. He said these rights are inalienable. Nobody can take them away. But in the chapter under the Constitution, Article 19(1)(a) says every citizen has the right to freedom of speech and expression. Now, freedom of speech and expression also includes the right of a free press, as well, and even the right to advertise the newspaper, as was held in the Indian examiner space in the dark days of the emergency. So therefore, the freedom of speech is something that is guaranteed to us as citizens by the Constitution. And why is freedom of speech required? Freedom of speech is like something like oxygen. Without that oxygen, man cannot survive. Without free speech, human beings cannot survive. How does one communicate with one's family if there is no right of free speech? How does one communicate with his government if there is no free speech? How does one address the courts if there is no free speech? Those free speech, therefore, is the basic of all human rights. Without free speech, there can be no other rights. It is the matrix, the foundation based on which all rights are guaranteed. There was an interesting case before the Supreme Court in the early days, in its earliest days. There was this communist leader who made provocative speech, inflammatory speeches against the government of India to bring it down. And that case, if I may refer to, is what is known as the Krishna versus State of Madras. And the judgment was written by Justice Vivian Bose. And this is what Justice Vivian Bose said while quashing the order of detention. It is perhaps ironical that I should struggle to uphold the freedom in favor of a class of persons who, if rumor is to be accredited, and the list of their activities furnished to us is a true guide, be the first to destroy them if they but had power. But I cannot allow predilections to sway my judgment of the Constitution. The leader was released, he must again take to arms against the state. Still, he said no. The man, if he has to be punished, has to be punished according to law. If he has to be detained, it must be a procedure prescribed by law. Failure to prescribe by law, the man is released. But, as I said earlier, this right of free speech is subject to reasonable restriction under Article 19(2). Is the Contempt of Court Act one such restriction? And consequently, is the Contempt of Court Act an impediment to free speech? Now, the power of contempt, which has been spoken about, is contained basically in the Contempt of Court Act, which is a national legislation, union, and we have the Constitution of India. On the Articles 129 and 251 to punish for contempt. Now, the Supreme Court in Pallavi Shade has held that a power to punish for contempt under the Constitution has to be exercised in consonance with the Contempt of Court Act. In other words, though there's a power in the High Court and the Supreme Court to punish for contempt, this must be within the well-settled principles as laid down under the Contempt of Court Act. The Contempt of Court Acts earlier did not have the right as truth as a defense. But the courts did allow a fair criticism of the judgment as long as you did not impute motives to a judge. Therefore, there was no bar on a citizen criticizing a judgment, but not attributing motive to a judge. Then there was an amendment to Article 13 of the Contempt of Court Act. And by this article, the truth as a defense was made possible. But that was made possible in a circumstance that a court must grant such liberty. To my mind, this part is oppressive. You cannot have a situation conferring a power on the court or the court interpreting that section that we will grant only liberty when we feel we can give it. If truth has to be a defense, it has to be universal. So this part of the law or the interpretation given by the courts, in my opinion, has to be whittled down, has to be read down, or the act has to be amended to provide truth as a defense. I cannot imagine for myself a judge who has served the institution with honesty and integrity has to be clubbed with judges whose integrity is doubtful. Why should not the citizens have the right to speak out if something is wrong? Of course, now the Supreme Court says that the issue as to whether something can be said against retired judges is a matter referred to a larger bench of the Constitution in Mr. Bhushan's second case. But the feeling among the citizens is that the Contempt of Court Act should be repealed. In my own opinion, and why is that? Because this is an act which is archaic, belongs to colonial times, and in modern democracies like USA and the UK, it has been repealed. Therefore, in the UK and USA, there's no law of contempt of scandalizing the court. In fact, when the judgment was delivered by the Supreme Court in the Al Gore case, one of the leading academicians wrote, "There the fools have done it again." Nobody hauled him up for contempt. It was an expression that we have done something wrong. Therefore, as I said earlier, and as Mr. Bhushan has pointed out, and of course they rightly did so, a petition was filed challenging the Contempt of Court Act. The matter was, if I am not mistaken, was listed originally before a bench of Justice Chandrachud, and the matter was brought before the bench of Justice Mishra, and knowing perhaps the consequences of what would the fate accompany, the petition was withdrawn.
So this is moderator.
Yes, I will try to be as brief as possible because therefore, but then I would just like to, so let not the speakers go out with the feeling. There is nothing like that the courts do not provide a defense to citizens. I will speak about the judgment in the case of S. Mulgaonkar, where the court recognized the following principles. Free speech is like free market of ideas. Fair criticism is good faith when it is in public interest. Consider the surrounding circumstances, persons making the comment, his knowledge on the field regarding which comments have been made, and intended purposes. The court can only punish if it should create disaffection and disrepute to erode the system. Justice Mr. Fali Nariman, a senior advocate of the Supreme Court, on the power to punish for contempt, in one of his speeches said, I would respectfully commend to them, the courts, the Atkin approach. Courts are not fragile flowers. They do not wilt in the heat of argument, nor of criticism, however trenchant and caustic. I would suggest that a contempt power not be used to discipline either the lawyers or the press. This creates a needless conflict which could be avoided. And since the time seems to be running again, I would speak about a hilarious moment in the Supreme Court. There was this bench hearing a matter, and senior advocate Ramaswamy was arguing before them. One of the judges took umbrage to what he was arguing and said, "Do you think we are fools?" Justice Advocate Ramaswamy, known for his wit, paused and said, "My lords, if I speak the truth, I'll be in contempt. Tonight, you will charge me of perjury." No judge ever thought of issuing a contempt notice to the lawyer. They laughed it off and went away. So therefore, what should be done is laugh away. And in conclusion, let me in and fly when the time is over. The institution they fly out from remains. The judges strengthen and protect the institution, not weaken it or destroy the independence by their actions, so that the faith of the people in the court of law is not diminished. If people lose faith in the institution of courts, it will not bode well for our democracy, as it is only the institution the people still believe is independent, though of late some are beginning to dispute that. There have been times under all governments when lawyers and even judges believe that some judges were close to dispensation in power, but by and large, judges have maintained their independence and impartiality so that the people feel that justice has not only been done, but seemed to be done. Justice is the bedrock of our democracy. To quote Abraham Ibn Ezra, a medieval scholar, it's a known fact that every kingdom based on justice will stand. Justice is like a building, injustice is like the cracks in that building, which cause it to fall without a moment's warning. And therefore, in conclusion, let light a candle and offer prayer so that judges who sit on the chair of justice do not fail our Constitution and its lofty ideals. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justice Rebellor. You went into quite much in detail. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure you have spent a lot of time in preparing this. We are encouraged to listen to you, even though we have spent more time listening to you, but it doesn't matter. It has given us a lot of learning time. There are 4 questions who have written down from 3 different people: Captain Eddie, Mr. David Mansingh, and Mr. Shashikant Parmar. Now, 3 of them has actually asked a question to Mr. Prashant Bhushan and Father Cedric Prakash. But Justice Rebellor, please feel to join in the answer. The 3 people who have asked one common question is, can there be a law? Can there be a law to control usage of religion or religious symbol in politics in India? So I think we'll request Mr. Prashant Bhushan to start first to go in, and then Father Cedric Prakash and Justice Rebellor. But please be in brief so that with 2 minutes, because we are already short of time. Sir, Prashant Bhushan, are you still there? Father Cedric, would you like to take on?
Yeah, I'm not giving a legal opinion. I am giving an opinion as a civil society person. There must be a law. We are a secular country. Then people will contend why that the word secular has been introduced much later after the emergency and so on. But right from the time Ambedkar spoke, and the founding fathers of the Constituent Assembly who gave us the Constitution and so on, we're speaking about a secular character, and that has to be maintained. And I don't think religion should be used in politics. There should be a law that needs to prevent it.
Justice Rebellor? Justice Rebellor, are you there?
Yes, I am there.
Yeah. Would you like to say anything, sir, to add to that?
I think the under the Representation of People's Act, you cannot.
You are not audible, sir. Justice Rebellor, you are not audible at the moment.
People have been debarred in the past for using religion to seek votes. That's not the point. The argument today is the distinction between religion and culture. When culture itself used, and where the colors like Bhagwa, symbols of one particular faith, are abused in the guise that they are not religious symbols but cultural symbols. And that play around with words, with imagery, is what happened in 2013 and again in 2019.
You are audible, John, sir. Please go ahead.
No, I did say that people in the past have been disbarred from fighting elections, some for 5 years, because they used language which was seeking votes in the name of a religion. But what I was trying to say was contemporary politicians have become wise. They don't use religion as religion, they use religion as culture. They're still seeking votes in the name of religion, but in the guise of culture. And whole parties have been born, including the current ruling party, which does it with great elan and great sophistication.
Thank you, John, sir, for joining in and taking the position. There is another question is that how do we ensure good governance equally for all the people in India? Any one of you, either you or Father Cedric. John, sir, either you, because I am not able to see Prashant Bhushan and Justice Rebellor.
Yeah.
We elect the governments. When it comes to elections, we see all sorts of excuses being given to choose the wrong person. You will choose him saying that he's less corrupt, although he's a killer. You will choose him for saying his economic policies is very good, although he's a killer. So when you are this has happened many times. This has happened in Goa once. It has happened in Delhi. You don't see the politics being played. You don't understand the ideological forces at play. You are allowing yourself to go with the flow. You get carried away by slogans, by imagery, by the persona of a person, by his campaign style, and you choose the wrong person. By the time you realize it, it's too late.
Thank you, sir. Father Cedric.
Yeah, I have a cartoon of Lakshman here, which says very clearly, Yeah. Okay.
It's switched off.
It's switched off. I don't think it can be seen properly. Basically, it says, I stopped making cartoons of politicians after cartoons became politicians. See, the point is whom we elect. We are responsible. I think we also have the power to recall. Once we are given the power to recall, as they have in the United States in some time, to recall the politician, the parliamentarian, the member of the legislative assembly, then our politicians will learn. Because once they are there, all the ache then just disappears after the promises they make to the electorate.
There are two more questions. Maybe two of you are already aware of it, Dr. John Dayal and yourself. It's about the presidential order of 1950 denying SC status to Dalit Christians and Muslims. Would you like to comment on that, please?
For me personally, I mean, what is there to comment upon it? It is there. We need to challenge it, but no government is willing to go head on, and particularly this government, you know. And with the type of people they have put in the Supreme Court, I'm not sure what is going to happen. The Dalit Christians will have to, with the others, Dalit Muslims and so on, will have to get onto the streets.
See, we need to
Johnson?
go into the history of why this law came into play. As I was explaining in my remarks, this is an anti-conversion law, whether you like it or you don't like it. It is closing the stable doors. It is to keep Dalits in the fold, not to allow them the double advantage of human dignity and the reparation, in a way, of 3,000 years of subjugation. Caste is in the soil of India. It is not in a faith. It's in the soil of India. The same person, when he migrates to Australia, suddenly stops being casteist. But the moment he comes back to India, he becomes a casteist. When he wants to marry his son to somebody, he becomes a casteist. And I say this, and I am willing to face everybody's anger. Each one of us who claims we are upper caste immediately believes in caste. I think we have to cleanse our conscience. The fight in the courts is going to be a very long one. Thank you very much.
Justice Rebellor, may I please request you to give your comments on all if whatever you have missed out. Justice Rebellor, you need to unmute yourself, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Now we are talking about caste. You see, in the Constitution has two concepts: scheduled tribes and scheduled castes. Now, insofar as scheduled tribes are concerned, as held by the Supreme Court, the tribes do not belong to any religion. They are animistic, and therefore question of the scheduled tribe belonging to a particular religion never arose, and therefore scheduled tribes have exercised the right of reservation as scheduled tribes under the Constitution. But when it comes to the scheduled castes, the Supreme Court recognized the matter. I understand from what Mr. John Dayal said is before a larger bench, that the scheduled castes are a part of the Hindu caste system. Though they are the untouchables, they are not a part of the Chaturvaina or the four castes. Now the question really is something more. If Sikhs, if converts to Sikhism, if converts to Buddhism, or even converts to Jainism can retain their rights, which also do not recognize caste, then how do you put Christians and Muslims in a different basket? It appears to be a total discrimination. On the one hand, you allow some religions, if they are converted to those religions, that those who are notified as scheduled caste would continue. But if you convert into another religion, then you are not. But my larger issue is by conversion, if a person was born into a particular caste, he does not cease to be. He continues to be, irrespective of his religion. And therefore, I hope that the larger bench of the Supreme Court will take into consideration these larger facts of one, apparent discrimination between the various religions, and the fact that we are born, irrespective of where you go, the stigma that we are born in, the thousands of years of enslavement, as rightly put it. And I remember Justice Bhagwati in one of his first judgment said, "Hush, my baby, don't cry, my child. Your tears are in vain. Our enemy understands not our suffering and pain." This is the fate of the scheduled caste, even after the republic, even after independence, and fate of those converts to Christianity is much more. It is not as if by becoming Christians overnight, the discrimination disappears. As a matter of fact, the discrimination continues, whether it matters in matters of marriage, whether it matters in other matters. But I only hope that the larger bench of the Supreme Court will consider the issue in its correct perspective, especially on the issue of discrimination, and resolve it in favor of the caste converted to Christianity.
Thank you, Justice Rebellor. I wish Mr. Prashant Bhushan was still around, because this presidential order matter was initially handled by his father in the Supreme Court on behalf of CBCI. So, but to come to the last question is directly addressed to Father Cedric Prakash, because Father spoke about FCRA. So, Mr. David Mansingh asked Father Cedric, you are right that we have fear on FCRA, money, etc. Kindly look that we are unable to progress, and all are blocked, threatening in the name of religion. Future look very uncertain at this time. Automatically we are threatened. What shall we do is the fear. Father Cedric?
Yeah. I'm not against any material. I'm not saying that we should not have FCRA. I'm not saying that we should not have our land, our schools. I'm not saying that. I'm saying is the spirituality of a Christian is the crib and the cross. Jesus came into the nothingness. Jesus died naked on a cross. Okay? And Jesus tells us not to fear anyone, especially those who try to harm. You know, we have had lots of martyrs and so on. But what we need to do, more than anything else, is to be visible and vocal in taking a stand for what is right, for what is truthful, for what is just. And I think only then we can truly proceed as disciples of Jesus, as witnesses in India today.
Thank you, Father. John, sir, would you like to add anything, or Justice Rebellor?
I think it's running very late.
Not on this subject.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So that brings us to the closure. I would like to propose a vote of thanks to all the speakers, Justice Rebellor, Dr. John Dayal, Mr. Prashant Bhushan, Father Cedric Prakash, and our National President, Mr. Ransi Dukuna, and Mr. Rafael D'Souza and his team, the Bombay Catholic Sabha, which has put in this this most important webinar. So many webinars happening, but this seems to be the most recent and relevant topic for all of us. We gained a lot of knowledge. I don't know how much we could store into our brain, but we thank once again all the speakers and all the participants, All India Catholic Union, Bombay Catholic Sabha, every member for initiating this webinar, and all of you for participating. Thank you very much.